But the question is whether or not, and I would ask this of, I think, everyone in the room who's covered, do you think that by covering your face from everyone else in society, you are exacerbating difference or making it less bad?
Mariam,
would any of you at least recognise that you are exacerbating a difference?
Is this divisive?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to look at human rights, OK? In 1998, there was the Human Rights Convention, OK? Under Article 9, it specifically says we all have the freedom of expression, we have the freedom of belief, we have the freedom of so many things that, you know, like in this country, I thought great...
Mariam, on Douglas Murray's point, sorry, on Douglas Murray's point, that this is, you know, do you understand that many people feel this is divisive? It is a curtain between you and the rest of society.
Well, to be quite frank, I think people are free to feel how they want. It doesn't, I don't care how you feel. It's really, no, wait. Really and truly, it's about my human rights. My human right, I am allowed to cover. You don't have to
just
agree.
Very briefly on the point that many people in the survey said that they feel unease, they feel uncomfortable, they feel anxious.
Well, to be quite frank, I feel like that towards emos, but that's all right.
Can I just point out, there is something fundamentally ludicrous about somebody dressed as you are talking the language of modern human rights.
Absolutely.
Well, to be
fundamentally ludicrous.
The Niqab.
Douglas Murray, a prominent British political commentator and author, has been a vocal critic of the niqab, a face veil worn by some Muslim women within the context of British society. His views on the niqab reflect broader concerns about cultural integration, social cohesion, and the interpretation of religious freedoms in a multicultural society like Britain.
If I hated Australia, hated the Australian people, hated Australian history, hated the Australian way of life, broke into the country illegally and spent my time trying to undermine Australia, why should I be in Australia? Why? What would I have brought the country? What benefit? What moral benefit? What financial benefit? What social benefit? The answer is you'd have brought no benefit. So why just hope that those people are not in large enough numbers and keep your fingers crossed and put it off for another day? I think we have to start saying very clearly, if you don't like it here, go.
The niqab, a garment that covers the face except for the eyes, has been a subject of intense debate in Britain for decades. Advocates argue that wearing the niqab is a matter of personal choice and religious freedom, stemming from interpretations of modesty in Islam. On the other hand, critics like Douglas Murray contend that the niqab poses challenges to social integration and communication in public spaces.
Well, with me now are Shalina Litt, a writer and a blogger who's also a child behaviour specialist. I'm also joined by Sahar Al-Faifi, a community activist who's also a molecular geneticist. And Fatima Barkatullah is the director of the Seeds of Change Muslim Women's Conference, the largest of its kind in Europe. Also here are the writer and commentator Douglas Murray, Kola Hassan, who's a lecturer and advisor on Islam, and last but not least, the writer and broadcaster Yasmin Alabai-Brown. Can I just begin with you, Fatima? Yes. 56% of British people don't really support the wearing of the full face veil in public. They don't want it.
Well, I think it depends on where you take the poll, really, because, something that I've recently launched is a project called Secrets of a Muslim Woman, and it's all about letting people know why we do what we do, because I think a lot of it is to do with not really being familiar with it. You know, I mean, my message to the British public is that you've got nothing to fear. You know, this is a piece of cloth.
They don't feel that, though, do they? Because elsewhere in this poll, a majority said they don't know how to relate to a woman wearing a full face veil.
I think, you know, the people who have actually interacted with women who wear the face veil, people who work with them. I mean, we're in East London today. In East London, the veil is practically, you know, normal on the streets of East London. People who've actually interacted and worked with women who wear the veil have absolutely no problem with it. I think it's the fear of the unknown.
Douglas Murray, would you like to see the veil banned here?
Well, I think, like a majority of British people, I think that it should be banned in public places, particularly places like courtrooms, where it's absolutely imperative that a jury are able to see the faces of people who are accused. As for an overall ban, I think, look, my own opinion is that niqab is highly undesirable. I think that we live in a society where people do show their faces, where huge amounts of our social interaction depend on people showing their faces. I think that it's very difficult to enforce a ban in public places like streets, but it should be certainly a desirable thing to discourage its wearing.
Difficult to impose a ban, but in principle you'd like to see one because you think in Britain, it's unacceptable.
In public buildings, in courts, in schools and places like this, absolutely, I think a ban would be very sensible. In streets and so on, I think it's difficult, but it should be societally discouraged.
Fatima?
No, a ban, I mean, I think it's a complete overreaction. Look, the niqab has been part of the British landscape for the last 20-odd years, OK? Muslim women have been going about their business. We've got a radio presenter here, we've got a scientist, we've got talented Muslim women who've got a lot to give to this society, who've been doing so and been very sensible about it. When we need to remove our face veils, we do it. But how do you think we get through airport security?
I mean, what about the fact that 56% of people are saying they don't want it here?
You know what? I'm not surprised at all, because when you know that high-profile politicians making such
Douglas Murray's critique of the niqab is multifaceted, influenced by his broader concerns about immigration, cultural assimilation and national identity. Murray argues that the niqab represents a barrier to social interaction and integration within British society. He perceives it as a symbol of cultural separation, inhibiting face-to-face communication and fostering isolation rather than integration. Murray's views are rooted in his belief that social cohesion is essential for a functioning society. He argues that visible face coverings like the niqab hinder interpersonal interactions that are crucial for building trust and understanding among communities. In his public statements and writings, Murray often highlights instances where the niqab may contribute to misunderstandings or discomfort among non-Muslims in Britain. From a legal standpoint, Murray has expressed reservations about the niqab's compatibility with British norms and values, particularly in settings such as courtrooms and educational institutions. He advocates for restrictions on wearing the niqab in public spaces where facial visibility is deemed necessary for security reasons or effective communication.
Offensive comments and big fuss about it.
But
I am not surprised when the public say they are against it.
We show our faces.
Exactly. The British society, the fabric of the British society is respecting the public freedom.
We are British.
Public freedom is part of it, the religious freedom.
What about
so
the
I've
fact
got the
that
right
people
to
feel
practice.
uneasy? They said they don't know how to relate to women who have their faces covered.
First of all, let them interact with us. Let us be open and engaging with them. This is number one. Secondly, 80% of communication in the world does not involve face-to-face. Twitter, Facebook, phones doesn't involve face-to-face communications.
I'm sorry.
The issue is the problemization here. It's not existent problem
I'm sorry. I worked in this area for 7 years, about 15 years ago, and this was not, as you said, a norm. This has been imported and exported for reasons which we haven't got time to go into. We live in a society, in this society, and we live in a country which is very, very complicated. And to shut yourself off as if the rest of us are infections and cutting...
How are we do not show
This is the meaning.
We are engaged, we are active. How are we shut off?
Shalina, you have said that in engaging with your elderly white neighbour who feels uneasy, sometimes you remove the veil. When you worked with children, you remove the veil. Isn't that an acknowledgement that it is difficult for people to engage with women who have their faces covered?
Yeah, I think it is. And I also honour what Douglas Murray has just said. He couldn't actually feel comfortable, and you know, I'm making a presumption here, but you couldn't say, let's do an outright ban. And that's great, because I understand you look at social cohesion. It's about looking at, let's isolate it. Whose discomfort are we going to favour? Because if I lift my veil, I'm then uncomfortable. And we've favoured someone's discomfort.
We live in a society, but I don't believe in the French ban. I don't think you should do that.
But why
absolutely,
not? If you're opposed to it,
no,
if you
I think there
is
a very simple way of saying, and a non-racist way of saying, in public institutions, everybody, whoever they are, must show their faces. It's Muslim exceptionalism that is becoming the problem.
No, it's not.
If we have the same rule for everybody, and at home, on the streets, I don't want people stopped. Okay.
We accommodate religious expression in this country. You know, Jehovah's Witnesses who don't want blood transfusions, Sikh people who want to wear turbans. We make exceptions, you know, in certain situations. And so, look, you know, I really want to reach out to the public and say, you've got nothing to fear from us.
But take
We're
up
British. I was born in this country. I love this country.
Take up Yasmin's point that this is about exceptionalism. Take up Yasmin Alibhai-Brown's point about this is about exceptionalism.
We accommodate.
Murray's stance reflects broader debates about cultural identity and the role of Islam in British society. He questions whether accommodating the niqab aligns with British values of openness, transparency and equal treatment under the law. Murray argues that while Britain values religious freedom, it also prioritises integration and shared cultural norms that promote social cohesion. Critics of Murray's viewpoint accuse him of cultural insensitivity and Islamophobia, arguing that his critiques unfairly target Muslim women's personal choices and religious practices. They contend that such criticisms overlook the diversity of Muslim communities in Britain and reinforce stereotypes about Islam and Muslim integration.
Don't we, in this country, and in my country, Britain, we accommodate religious expression. We do make exceptions for people. And there's nothing, and that's what I thought.
And we cannot destroy the minorities and the religious belief in the name of equality.
But what if the majority feel uncomfortable, feel uneasy and say they don't want it?
I think then the onus is on us as well, isn't it? I mean, to actually reach out. And I'm hoping that this is just going one step towards that, to say to people, look, you know, we're human beings just like you.
But if I may very quickly, religious freedom is an extremely important thing, and I think most people who would agree, I hope in this room, that Britain is the most tolerant place in the world to live, including as a Muslim.
Yeah.
But let's just add one thing to this, if I may. The issue of social interaction is very important, and not just to me, but obviously to a majority of the British people. Yeah. What I say tonight, what Yasmin says and other people say tonight, people see our faces, they know who said it. I'm sorry to say this, but nobody knows who you are. They can hear your name, they can't see you. If I say something stupid on television tonight, people know it's me saying it. If you do, with all due respect, you can disappear and no one knows.
No, we're not disappearing. You
what
can
does
see
this
us
say?
here. Come
the
on.
meaning of this thing is extremely important to address. The meaning of this thing is women are by nature dangerous to men and society. Therefore, they must be covered, they must be buried. That's the meaning of it. And that's what I cannot accept.
I mean, Fatima, come back on exactly that point, because we have spoken to women who say that they cover their faces because they don't want to incite passions among men. I mean, that is essentially Yasmin's point.
Well, look, essentially, I think, you know, that's Yasmin's opinion.
No, it's not my opinion.
Yes, it is. It is your opinion.
Ask the Taliban. Ask Taliban why they're opposing it.
Yasmin, you know, I'm really sorry. Maybe you haven't really met women in Niqab. I would like to invite you out to my house. You know, you can see my face. We can sit together. We can have a laugh.
Yes, but
and then I think it will change your
Douglas
opinion.
Come to your house and see your face, though, could he?
I can assure you I'm not going to be
He could
aroused.
meet my husband. No, you're welcome. You would be welcome to, you know, come to my house.
Kola Hassan, yeah, can I ask, I mean, you used to wear the niqab and then changed your mind. Why?
Two main reasons. One was theological. I made some attempt to actually study the whole notion of niqab in Islam, and I found that it's not actually mandatory. The hijab, the headscarf, is mandatory, but the niqab is not. It's part of Islamic society right from the beginning, but it's not mandatory. Just go and read a little bit of Ibn Kathir, for example.
Yeah, I'm a scholar in training, actually, so I do know that.
Sorry, and secondly, we have a social function in society. We are here to interact with society. We have to have a social consciousness. We have to benefit society. We have to interact with society. And I realized in those 3 years I was a nobody. Nobody wanted to talk to me because they couldn't talk to me. I could smile until the cows come home, but nobody could see me smiling.
You see, that's a very good point, isn't it? Because you say you were a nobody, and yet many...
Public opinion on the niqab in Britain is divided, reflecting broader debates about multiculturalism, identity politics and religious pluralism. Polls suggest varying degrees of support for banning face coverings like the niqab in certain public settings, with concerns about security, integration and gender equality playing significant roles in shaping public discourse and policy decisions. Douglas Murray's perspectives on the niqab have contributed to public discourse on multiculturalism, immigration and national identity in Britain. His writings and media appearances have sparked debates about the limits of religious accommodation in secular societies and the balance between individual rights and societal norms.
Many people in our poll disagreed with this notion that it was empowering in any way.
And I bet you there were many Muslims in that survey. Most Muslims don't
Yes,
care
I
for this
absolutely
either.
agree with that,
So,
yes.
so to say British as if it was, you know, non-Muslims, most of us daren't speak out. When I do, I get death threats. I've had emails just this week
I am
from
sorry.
Niqab.
I am
He's
sorry,
from
that's
Niqab. He's
wrong.
calling me a prostitute. What is this freedom that we have?
No one
we can't even criticise what is not acceptable,
You are
actually.
free to
No, no,
criticise
you're free to
I mean, what do you
anything.
make of that? Making, in a free democracy, making her views known and getting that sort of...
That's fine. We're
hate
happy
response.
about it.
I think
That's
the
what- I
issue that
welcome
we...
this debate.
But about the response that she gets.
Well, that's
that's
wrong,
terrible.
obviously.
That's
It's
terrible.
It's
No, we
absolutely terrible.
acknowledge
It's
that,
not
and
acceptable.
We should be able to discuss it. We should be able to talk about it. And I acknowledge that people
No, I
feel
think
uncomfortable.
one of the problems is that the minute religion comes into it, what happens with the people who do wear the niqab often feel they are religiously superior and more pious than people who
Nobody
don't.
has said that today. Nobody has said that today.
Let me just move it out to the
many
audience,
times.
if you would. Sophia, I'm right in saying you also used to wear
Yes,
the
I did,
niqab,
yes.
and you again decided not to.
Yes.
Why
that's
was
right.
that?
The reason for that was that, and that was a personal choice. I had an incident where niqab was pulled off me, and it really frightened me, and I became very, very anxious. But I feel very strongly about some of the things that's been said here. One of the things that you've been, for example, Yasmin, you've said about, you know, freedom of speech and how people are threatening you. I think that's completely unacceptable Islamically. You know, we can't be responsible for all the Muslims and for all the people around the world. But I will say that just like you have the freedom of choice to express how you feel, we have the freedom of choice. I have a freedom of choice to not wear a niqab, and she has the freedom of choice to wear a niqab.
Did you feel that you were forced out of wearing it, or did
One
you
of the
come
things
to
I
a
did-
different view about it?
Yeah, one of the things it was a very personal choice for me. It meant a lot to me to wear the
This
niqab.
is not shopping in Primark. This has a meaning, and it's the meaning I'm arguing
Yeah,
about.
it's-
And actually,
but that's your perception.
Let me explain to you the meaning.
Isn't the suggestion of your argument that
But
these
that's
women
your-
don't
Yasmin,
know
but that's-
what
No,
their
but
own
Yasmin,
choice is?
that's your
They
perception.
do know,
Fundamentally
absolutely
anti-feminist.
do know, which is why I'm objecting to it.
Jasmine, but that's your perception. You think that this is how you...
No,
you know,
Sophia, I
how,
will
my
ask you something
perception...
very specific, if you
Yeah.
would. You are a psychotherapist.
Yes, I'm a psychotherapist.
But you deal with women who are forced into wearing the niqab.
Another thing I would mention to regarding communication, in the 9 years of counselling with Sakina Muslim counselling that I do, all of my clients, majority of them are all we do phone counselling. And a lot of good work is done. I don't see their face, they don't see my face. So it's not really about looking at someone and really connecting with that person, because we don't connect with the outer, we connect with the inner.
So you think the loneliness that you talked about seeing in these women comes from where?
And not a single person, not a single woman.
Douglas Murray's perspective on the niqab intersects with broader discussions about cultural sensitivity and integration, while critics argue that Murray's views may perpetuate stereotypes or stigmatise Muslim women who choose to wear the niqab. His stance resonates with concerns about the societal implications of face-covering garments.
Has said to me, my husband has forced me to wear a niqab. What the issues they do have as regards to niqab, I am fearful to go out. I'm at home, I'm lonely, I'm depressed. I don't even want to go out because I feel like I'm not accepted. And the other thing I really want to express is that where is the humanity? You know, at the end of the day, you know, as a woman, as a person, as a human being, where's my right to be who I am? This is my identity.
You have that right. You have that right, and you exercise it, and so are all of the other ladies in this room. But the question is whether or not, and I would ask this of I think of everyone in the room who's covered, do you think that by covering your face from everyone else in society, you are exacerbating difference or making it less bad?
Mariam,
would any of you at least recognise that you are exacerbating a difference?
Is this divisive?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to look at human rights, okay? In 1998, there was the Human Rights Convention, okay? Under Article 9, it specifically says we all have the freedom of expression, we have the freedom of belief, we have the freedom of so many things that, you know, like in this country, I thought
Mariam, on Douglas Murray's point, on Douglas Murray's point, that this is, you know, do you understand that many people feel this is divisive? It is a curtain between you and the rest of society.
To be quite frank, I think people are free to feel how they want. It doesn't. I don't care how you feel. It's really no. Wait. Really and truly, it's about my human rights. My human right, I am allowed to cover. You don't have to
just
agree.
Very briefly on the point that many people in the survey said that they feel unease, they feel uncomfortable, they feel
to be
anxious.
quite frank, I feel like that towards emos, but that's all
Can
right.
I just point out that there is something fundamentally ludicrous about somebody dressed as you are talking the language of modern human rights.
Absolutely.
Fundamentally ludicrous.
That's in your mind. That's in your mind, Douglas.
Kola Hassan.
This lady is constantly talking about rights. As a Muslim, you should know that responsibility is there as well. You have a responsibility to society around you.
Exactly. I'm a community organizer. I'm a scientist. I am engaged with the community, so I'm not isolated.
You have a responsibility. Sorry, 1 second. You have a responsibility in wider society.
Well, obviously speaking, as a Muslim woman right now, you know, all this talk about there being a fear of us, well, fear stems from ignorance. For them to be fearful, they need to understand us, and we need to understand them. Obviously, as British citizens, we do understand them. We were raised in British schools. Some of us go to university here, we work here. We understand the British culture, but do you really understand the Islamic culture?
Pardon me, that's not the role.
You can't possibly understand the British culture because there's been hundreds of years. And my mother's generation, because I too am a Muslim, my mother's generation, they were beaten, bullied and burnt because they wanted to get rid of all of this and be seen as proper equals. You're betraying that history. And this country...
From Murray's viewpoint, the niqab symbolises more than a religious garment. It represents a potential barrier to social cohesion. He argues that visible face coverings can complicate everyday interactions, hindering non-verbal communication and inhibiting social integration. This concern is particularly acute in public spaces such as schools, hospitals or courts, where facial recognition and clear communication are crucial.
We fought for women's rights, and you've now taken us back to the dark ages.
I'm sorry, but...
Can I just take it from Shabita?
Yes.
You are a doctor within the NHS. 1 second, please. You are a doctor within the... Excuse me, can we all listen to each other? You're a doctor in the NHS.
Yes, I am.
And obviously that is one of the very public places where a ban, you know, if it were to be considered, that...
Well, first of all, I would like to say that calling for a ban on niqab in NHS is actually talking about an issue that does not really exist. Because me and my friends, a lot of have been contacting a lot of doctors all across the 4 countries of United Kingdom, and none of them have ever come across a doctor who actually observed the face veil within NHS, or even a nurse. Exactly. So I don't really see that why an issue that does not really exist is actually being addressed. There is no one, or no doctor or a nurse who actually wears the niqab in NHS.
Just very,
even
very
myself,
on that point,
because
isn't that an acknowledgement that there is a difficulty for many people, that patients would find it uncomfortable?
No, it's not actually like that, because I am not given a choice to wear it within NHS. When I know it as a fact that if I wear my face veil and go to a job interview, I will never be taken up for a job.
How is it to ask, you all here, how is it that you say it's an absolutely fundamental, you have to wear it, it's a right, it's a necessity upon you, but yet you say you go through an airport and it doesn't matter if you lift it? Is it so negotiable? In France, many of the women who said we cannot go out if we don't wear it have taken it off.
Can I just say,
Shalina.
You know, there is a place where we have the right to exercise our right. And if this was a school or a playground, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the bullies are winning here. There is a majority of people who have the power and resources to put out there an image about the niqab. I teach in schools and
Murray's advocacy for restrictions on the niqab in certain public settings aligns with broader legal and policy debates in Britain. While the country upholds principles of religious freedom, it also recognises the need to balance individual rights with public safety and social harmony. The legality of face coverings in contexts like identification checks or courtroom testimonies has sparked legislative proposals and judicial decisions aimed at clarifying where religious freedoms intersect with societal norms.
I said to a young bunch of children, I said to them, if somebody came into your school, a boy, and he had nail varnish on, and he had high heels on, you know, and you seen him getting bullied, would you defend his right to be the way he was? Or would you ask him to change the way that he's dressed? Now, this is what I'm saying is, I said that I respected the fact that in context, you said in a courtroom, in the classroom, or in public settings where there are people who have got mixed opinions, that we should have policies and procedures that control these things. But being in Britain, I'm proud to be British.
Just very briefly, can I ask you, Sahar, many of the women who came forward to talk to us today are very young. And actually, one of the questions that I think a lot of people ask is, you know, we've looked at Afghanistan and we've heard stories of women who have burnt the face veil and are terrified of the prospect of having to wear it again. Yeah. And they just don't understand how young women in Britain want to wear it here. Very briefly, if you can.
Well, I started wearing the niqab at a young age, and the reason is after a research. It's a long spiritual journey. I found out that when I wear the niqab, I'll be closer to God. It's an act of worship, it's an act of modesty, and it's liberating and dignifying. And since then, I've never changed my mind. And although my parents, my mum, my sister, don't wear it. It's me. It's my personal choice.
But yes, and in a free society, the opinions of other people also have to matter. It's not just about you exercising your choice. The way other people feel about that should be of some concern to you.
But you know, these feelings are coming from negative prejudices.
We have
coming from
You don't want men's opinions?
No.
You don't want men's opinions?
I'm sorry, we are going to have to end it there. I'm really sorry.
As the only man, I'm sorry you don't want to hear men's opinions.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm afraid that is all we've got time for, though many more people wanted.
Critics and supporters alike discuss the niqab's implications for gender dynamics within Muslim communities and broader society. Murray raises questions about whether the niqab reinforces patriarchal norms or restricts women's autonomy and participation in public life. While some argue that wearing the niqab empowers women to assert their religious identity, others contend that it perpetuates gender inequality or restricts women's visibility and voice in public discourse.
My guest tonight is a neoconservative writer who's in the country for the Australian Think Inc. event Polarised alongside Dr. Cornel West. His book is The Strange Death of Europe, Immigration, Identity, Islam.
We do have a problem. We have a problem when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. Truth is, the great disappointment of the last 14 years has been that civil society has failed, that we can't do the things to the Islamists that we would do, as I referred to the neo-Nazis.
Please welcome Douglas Murray, everybody. Hello. Welcome, Douglas. Thanks for coming on the show. I know you're very concerned about Western civilization. This show is technically part of the Western canon. Yeah. Thoughts?
Yeah, the decline in a nutshell.
Well, that's a show. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it very much. Just need to make a disclaimer at the top. Myself and the executive producer of this program, Dan Illich, are involved in your tour with Dr. Cornel West in the country. That was separate to the decision to book you on the show. We haven't been bribed into having a neoconservative on the ABC, but I need to put that out there. If people aren't familiar with your work, what is this strange death of Europe that you refer to?
Well, for many years I've travelled as a reporter, as a journalist across the Third World and Middle East, Africa, many of the war zones of these areas, seen many of the places where people are fleeing from. And in 2015, I was reporting from across my continent, across Europe, when people were coming in unprecedented numbers. We were talking about the German population taking in an additional 2% in a single year alone, where basically the German Chancellor said anyone who makes it to Europe can come. And I saw all of this firsthand, and I realized that there was a catastrophe in the making, a catastrophe which I think has already started to unfurl in the years since. I realized this is just a version of a problem that every country is having to think about. And we're very lucky countries, yours and mine. We're countries that people want to come to. And that isn't an easy thing to deal with, because we know that we cannot take in the world, and yet we can't have the conversation about what we can do. And I thought that we need to think about this much more deeply than we are.
The political consequences of that decision sort of flowing through Germany and affecting Angela Merkel. Some changes seem to be happening. They're trying to get more agreements with North African countries and looking at trying to return some people to where they came from.
Bribed Turkey.
Right. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, we already know some of the consequences. German elections saw a party that's generally described as far-right, the AfD, is now the main party of opposition in the German parliament. Unbelievable social problems, unbelievable problems with freedom of expression. I mean, another data law just came in at the beginning of this year that tries to stop German citizens saying very critical things about their government on social media. And I just, you know, who could predict...
The debate over the niqab reflects deeper tensions around multiculturalism and national identity in Britain. Murray's critiques challenge the notion that cultural diversity should always be accommodated without question, suggesting instead that integration cooperation and shared values are essential for social cohesion. This perspective resonates with concerns about the integration of immigrant communities and the preservation of British cultural norms amidst increasing diversity. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.